We've got the actual love and relationship lessons from the hit television series Nobody Wants This. So the first lesson, the first topic, theme that really popped out to me, and you really find it, a few episodes into this, is the archetype of the devouring mother. So
dun, dun, dun.
For context, interesting pair with the devouring mother. Noah, Adam Brody's character, is Orthodox Jew, and his family is very traditionally Jewish. And his mother expects him to marry within the faith. In the show, he had recently broken up with this woman named Rebecca, who was kind of what seemed like his betrothed, traditional Jewish
It was kind of like an arranged thing.
Really seemed like it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring up these topics, talk about the thing behind the thing, and then what is the lesson? If we can actually use something from pop culture and squeeze a bit of legitimate relationship juice out of it, let's do it. So that's what we got. The thing behind the thing, as it pertains to Noah's mother, who wants him to only marry within the Jewish culture, is pertaining to this human archetype of the devouring mother. And so I realized that there is dogma in religion, whereby parents might actually think that if you marry outside of the religious space, you're going to burn in hell, for instance. But oddly enough, in this show, that's actually not what they're really getting at. I think the intention of this profile with this mom and son relationship is to highlight this devouring mother archetype. So let's just call it the DMA. The DMA refers to a maternal figure who, instead of nurturing growth and independence to their child, overly controls and smothers her children. They are devouring that individual's independent growth processes. So some other examples in pop culture would be, if you've seen the animated movie Tangled, which is about the chick who has the super long hair. What's her name? Rapunzel. The stepmother is kind of a devouring mother.
Yeah.
Or a movie we recently watched on an airplane, Crazy Rich Asians. The super rich, sexy bachelor guy's mother is a devouring mother. There's no woman who is good enough for her son. And so the thing behind the thing is less about the fact that you have to marry within the religion, and it's more about the mother, who I think everybody can find an example in their own lives, maybe their own families, maybe in their own, in-law type relationships, where it has nothing to do with the qualifications. It's that the perspective of that mother is that no woman will ever be good enough for my son.
Yeah.
It's control.
Oh God, we were watching it last night and I was like, I am so glad that I don't have to deal with that kind of mother-in-law situation. You hear horror stories, and a lot of it, comes back to this type of devouring mother where she's so possessive of her son, almost in sometimes an overly possessive, overly attached way, where it's no woman's going to be good enough for my son because I want to be with my son.
Right.
It kind of feels like that.
There is this weird, unconscious, almost romantic connection between
jealousy.
The mother and the son. It's bizarre. So I think when this plays out in real life, the tendency for, let's say, the daughter-in-law is to try to meet all of the pseudo qualifications that the mother-in-law is trying to hold her to.
And it's never going to happen.
But the lesson here is never going to happen.
No.
It's actually just a waste of your time. Might even make it worse if you continue to try to be something that is not even reachable.
Yeah.
And so the real lesson here, and I pulled 3, what could you do in this scenario? Just because even if you don't get a full hyperbole experience with mother-in-law from hell, there's probably attributes of this in many, many relationships that are quote unquote healthy. And so for me, it's number one is that relationship. Let's call it the Noah and what's that chick's name? Joanne. Noah and Joanne's relationship. Set boundaries. The adult child and that adult child's relationship must get to the point, regardless of what their parents think about them, but Jesus Christ, especially if they're in their 30s, they must establish firm, healthy boundaries from the mother altogether. This is the family now. We've talked about this in our relationship. In our part 1, we continued to like perceive our marriage as this extension of the families that we came from. And I think a really proper formation of new relationship is to consider it as almost a new family altogether. It's not that you don't have those really strong connections and that those parts of family aren't super important, but this is like a new whole being in the form of the relationship.
I want to highlight here that like, yes, like the couple needs to create and hold to these boundaries, but it must be initiated by the non-in-law, by the, like, if we're talking about a mother-son relationship here that needs boundaries, it must come from the man in this particular case. I'm not saying that the woman can't participate or hold firm to the boundaries or whatever, or be, supportive and everything, but if it's not, the mother is never going to take it seriously unless it comes directly from the man. And you see this in the show because they're sitting at dinner and the mother is like completely just trash talking Joanne in front of everyone. And Noah like looks at her and says, "Mom, enough." And she, the mother is like, "Oh my God, this has never happened.
Right.
What is she doing to my son?" Probably.
Right.
But as the watcher, you like want to like cheer, you're like, okay, this guy, like he's got a pair of balls.
Right. Well, and I'm sure there's a bunch of guys out there who've had father-in-laws where there's a similar like insurmountable expectation. Sure. And so I think that the same could be said for, it's one thing to stand up for yourself, but it's even more powerful when the relationship includes the individual whose family is pressuring them to really step into that space of like, yo, that's enough.
Yeah.
Emotional detachment. So like the health of your relationship should not be dependent on whether or not you're getting approval from your in-laws. That's easier said than done because anyone who does get approval from their in-laws, it really does like feel good.
Yeah. And the opposite is true. Like when you know that this family does not like you, it is so stressful.
Yeah.
Not that I've ever experienced that, but.
And then lastly, I mean, you could apply this little lesson to pretty much anything, but like the more you pour into your own relationship development, your own individual development, where, the theme, it's one thing to not need your mother-in-law's approval, but to live your life as if you don't need anyone's approval is a really healthy approach to living and happiness and being satiated by life.
Yeah.
And so the more you can just lean into your own ability to fill up your own cup, your own ability to define success criteria for you and your relationship that doesn't have to do with what other people think about you, the more it's going to support the relationship at large, the health and vitality of the relationship. And I assure you, in most cases, now, if you have a malignant narcissist for an in-law, you may just write that one off. It just may not ever happen for you. But usually, even if you have a difficult in-law environment and those people still love their child, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years down the road when you have kids and you have a family, and they see deep love and commitment and accountability to the decisions that they've made as a family and as a couple, those in-laws will go, man, they may not ever say I was wrong. Yeah. But they may warm up. Right. They may open up. Yeah. And I've definitely seen it. I've definitely felt it. And it's something that doesn't feel good in the moment, but if you can have the vision of like the 10-year plan and you know that it's going to only lead to more abundance in your own relationship, I think those external factors like the mother-in-law or the father-in-law from hell will slowly start to just like wear away. Yeah. Yeah. I'm breaking it down. All right. Next up, I'm going to jump to the fear of the feminine. So there's a really like turning point moment in the show. I think it's like, I don't know, probably the third or fourth episode. Because, Joanne, as we've stated, is kind of this, call her daddy type character. Call me daddy. And she's kind of bouncing around dating apps and like dating kind of douchey guys. And, it's all for the podcast. Like she tells all these like dysfunctional dating, stories on the podcast, and it makes for entertaining listening, whatever. And so she's never really been with a solid man. And there's this moment where she's like learning more about herself as she's realizing how much she likes this
guy that's different than any other guy she's ever dated. And she's talking about, he asks her basically what her greatest fear is. And it's such a vulnerable moment when she shares this. She has to actually turn her back to him because it's like, she's like, I can't look at you and do this. Like, I need to just speak, and I'm going to turn my back to you. So she speaks on behalf of, I think, many women when she confesses to him. She says, I'm afraid of becoming emotionally dependent on a man just for him to break my heart because I'm too much to handle.
Wow.
And I've heard that many times, from different women in maybe different words, but essentially the thing behind the thing is I'm scared of being too much for him. I'm scared of showing myself. I'm scared of showing all of myself to this person, to this guy, because I don't want to scare him. I don't want to be too much to handle. And that is like a major theme in masculine feminine dynamic. A lot of times the man can be something like, I'm afraid of not being enough. So they're always striving. And for the woman, it's, I'm afraid of being too much.
Yeah. And so like, maybe let's double click on that. Mm-hmm. When I have the feeling of whether I'm not enough, it oftentimes literally means like, am I not making enough money for our family? Am I not physically attractive enough? Am I not smart or intelligent enough to wow you with my intellect or whatever? Those are some of the things that come to mind when I think about not being enough. What for a woman is like too much then?
Your emotions. The fact that you have mood swings on a regular weekly basis, depending on your cycle. The fact that many women are conflicted in their desire to have a career, but also desire to be a mother. And it can seem like we don't know what we want.
Yeah.
Or that we're not all in on one or the other. Women are often touted as irrational, emotional beings that can't be trusted. That's a lot. That's a lot to carry. And of course, there can be individual experiences of just personality traits. But that's definitely, I would say it's mostly revolves around our emotions and being tied to our emotions, which, by the way, is a strength, or it can be. It can definitely be unbalanced, but it's, that proximity to our emotions that allows us to, dance freely and be in our feminine when we hear an amazing song, or be an incredible mother because we're nurturing and we're connected to those emotions. And obviously I could go on and on, but that's what I think of when I think of being, too much.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
Or even just like talking too much.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think, part of this comes from, and there may be some women out there that hate me for saying this, but I think it needs to be said. I think women since the 60s, and there's plenty of people that talk about this all over the internet, all over podcasts, but since the sexual revolution of the 60s, where birth control was invented, and now women have this way to kind of take their sexuality back and be in control of, whether they get pregnant or not. Because innately we know as women that like being sexually active is much more of a risk and much more expensive for us than it is for men, because dude guy could just like bounce, and this is potentially an 18-year commitment for us if things don't go well. Right. So obviously there's an argument to be had around birth control, that it was good for women, but there's also parts of it, I think, that aren't so great. And women have been told since the 60s, since this time, that we can do and should do everything that men do. Everything from our career to fitness to how we date. And so I've seen this, in my own life experience. I've, talked to, witnessing friends, dating and life experiences, people just DMing me and telling me like what's going on. You'd be surprised what people say in the DMs on this kind of stuff. And now this show that we're talking about, where we're seeing that it's actually really unnatural for most women to behave like men. And this is something that was touted as, like feminism, basically. And it makes me wonder, like, is this really in the best interest of females? I don't know. And so, yeah, we see that in this confession of Joanne, she is just speaking directly for the feminine. She's, that the feminine wants to be seen fully and loved fully. And not having that, being seen fully and being like, whoa, I don't want that. That's like the biggest fear. But in our society and in the show, it takes a really good man for her and for many other women, after countless douchebags, to flip on the light and help our leading lady really to surrender to what she yearns for in her heart, which is to let her masculine shells go and be in her feminine and let dude guy lead. And he really provides this thing that the feminine yearns for, which is a safe, calm, trustworthy, protective, masculine container, for lack of a better word. And I think many, many women want that and would thrive with that, but we've been told we need to put on these masculine shells and behave like men to reach happiness. But I just don't think that that's a recipe for success. And the last thing that I'm going to say here is I think there's two reasons why this show is so popular. The writers nailed some really important archetypes. One we've already talked about. And it showcased that women are tired of having to behave like men, pretending that they are exactly the same and fucking their way to happiness.
Yeah.
It's very empty. And I think largely women are consciously or unconsciously sick of it. And this show puts that on a billboard.
Nailed it. Yeah, nailed it. Like really, really well said. This show, nobody wants this, is successful because it's showcasing the step back for women from this endless pursuit of finding themselves through transactional relationships and moving into softness and listening to their own intuition, while a man is stepping out of what he should do, what other people are telling him to do, and choosing his own ideas and perspectives about relationship, about love. And he's shooting his shot like a man should do from a place of integrity, not to fuck, not to get off, not to, scorecard your way to as many women as you possibly can, but for something that is deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And to me, why this is really taking off, in addition to all the, OC nostalgia and the freaking amazing acting and some of these other components, is that, like, damn it, dude, our culture is ready for this. Mm-hmm. We're desperate for this. We're thirsty for real, legitimate masculine and feminine dynamics playing out in modern mainstream relationships. Mm-hmm. Aren't we all fucking tired of this? Like, you can be whatever the fuck you want to be and it should all just fit and be happy. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of cases and arguments for just radical acceptance, but sometimes leaning into your innate being, like being a man or being a woman, and just listening to the natural rhythms of your own self will allow for something like this to take place. I know this is a fictional story, but there are components to this that I think are really resonating. Yeah,
this is a story that's never happened, but is happening all the time.
Right. It's myth, for sure. For sure.
And so I think, if we're talking about like lessons, if you're dating, you are better off. I'm speaking from a woman's perspective, but of course this applies for both men and women. You're better off being honest about what your real desires are in a relationship, in a partner, and your fears too. Maybe not date number one, but like if that kind of thing scares dude guy off or scares dude girl off, then they didn't possess the emotional depth that you require and need for a really like deep, healthy relationship.
Yeah.
So like you've wasted less of your time. So I think that that's more productive. Just being honest. Go figure. Being honest with what you want and what you,
God forbid,
what you fear. And if you are a feminine being, acquiring the masculine shells of society that society has told us are necessary will not help you find the partner your heart really desires. So just let them go. It's not easy, but let them go.
Thank you, Adam Brody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.